Right. Hello and welcome to Smiling Souls. This is Stephanie Keenan Ray and Wendy Tadiucci. How are you doing today?
A little under the weather, but I've got my
There you go. Paul's defense.
Kleenex. I have
Yep.
all the things. How about you?
I'm doing well. I got to sleep in today. And so that was
I'm
exciting.
jealous.
I mean, I tossed and turned a bit because, of course, my body was awake at the time it's supposed to wake up. But then I was like, I am not getting out of bed.
Oh, there's one of those. Oh, so you gave yourself the grace to just.
Yes. Well, the child has the day off, so therefore I got to not have to hustle him out the door, and it was quite nice.
I love that.
And Joe is actually home today, so that's nice too. So yeah, all the things.
Right? A day for staff.
Yeah. So should we do our oracle cards?
We should.
Okay.
We should. And then we'll get to introduce our guest.
Yeah. All right. So today I pulled from my archangels. This is Prioritize. It is Archangel Metatron. Ooh, I've never gotten Metatron before.
Holder of the Akashic records, that angel.
It says, focus on your highest priorities. I will help you get organized and motivated. What is your calling? What makes your heart sing? When you focus on these areas, your joyful energy increases. Isn't that what I talk about all the time? Which benefits everyone. Take charge of your schedule and spend more time on projects and activities close to your heart. Make choices that honor your priorities and support your life's mission. Working with Archangel Metatron. Metatron is one of two archangels who walked on this earth as human men, the other Sandalphon. Metatron was the prophet and scribe, Enosh, who ascended after his exemplary earth life. He continues working as the scribe and record keeper in heaven. He helps people develop organizational and record-keeping skills as well. When you call upon Metatron, he motivates you to organize your priorities. Okay, I can use help with that last sentence, because if you could see my desk, it's
organize your priorities.
If you could organize my priorities, Metatron, we could use that, yes.
Well, so shall it be. He will.
And so shall it be. I love that, though, and I think it's a beautiful card.
It's a gorgeous card. So here's the weird thing, Stephanie.
Yes, ma'am.
I got a message from his brother.
Yes,
that walked Earth this morning. Sandalphon.
Yes.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Very interesting. All right. Well, so, oh gosh, I don't have the book out on this. I'm kind of a mess this morning, just to be honest.
It's all good. It's all good.
Gosh, it's been a week, you guys. It's been a week. Okay, so I pulled Worth the Risk. And I have to flip it over because I can't read the little teeny tiny because it's flipped in the thing. You won't know if it's right for you unless you try. So I had this pulled open earlier and I just put the book back in the thing. All right. This says, you might be thinking about taking a risk with your goals. Your fear could be interfering with this possibility. You might be worried about how this will appear to others or feel the need to justify your desires. Focus on overcoming whatever is blocking you from exploring this chance. Setting out the pros and cons of this gamble will help you decide whether the risk is worth taking. You may find that your fears are unfounded. Once you have looked into and weighed the possibilities of success against the cost of failure, you can make a more grounded, informed decision. Do not underestimate what you are capable of accomplishing. Sorry.
Wow.
Even if you fall well short of your ultimate goal, the potential loss could be a sound investment in practice and experience. You won't know until you give it a try. The best way to learn is by doing. I learned that in 4-H.
Yes.
Remember, survivor.
Yes.
Anyway, in everything you attempt, you know more about your skills and likes. You can change your course, your mind, and your vision as you learn and grow. For now, Envision yourself taking on and accomplishing a goal. Do you feel joyful as you complete this venture? Stephanie, do you feel joyful as you organize yourself?
I do feel joyful as I organize
See?
myself, actually.
See?
Mm-hmm.
So this says a serene ocean meets a peaceful shore. The waves slowly yet constantly etch out their path on the land. Trust in yourself and let the sky or the vast ocean be your limit. So sky's the limit.
Mm-hmm. Woohoo. I love it.
Wow. Right?
Yeah, that one seems to be appropriate.
It really does. The cards,
All right. And then for our guest, Joanne, I pulled All Is Well by Archangel Jeremiel. So everything is happening exactly as it's supposed to, with hidden blessings you'll soon understand. Sometimes what appears to be a problem is actually an answered prayer in disguise. When we ask for help, heaven may dismantle the old to make room for the new. During this time of change, practice relaxation methods such as yoga, deep breathing, exercise, and meditation. Ask me to make your transformation smooth and harmonious for everyone involved, and know that this change is for the better. When working with Archangel, each Archangel has a specific aura color. Jeremiel's is a deep eggplant purple. When you see sparkles of dark purple light, this is one way that you know that he is around you. The Archangel has a particular type of crystal aligned to his energy. And that crystal is amethyst. When you wear an amethyst, you may feel closer to Jeremiel, Jeremiel's kind and loving energy.
Amethyst. Love that. That's your
love
card,
that
Joanne.
card. It's so pretty.
That's beautiful.
Ladies, it is time to talk about what no one told you about menopause.
So join us for the Smiling Souls Menopause Summit. We're going to be looking behind the curtain. We're going to have a very bold, very honest, very empowering, very funny virtual event where we dig deep into the real experiences of perimenopause and beyond.
We're going to kick things off with laughs from comedian Rita Disnoya Garcia, followed by some absolutely powerful talks from dynamic speakers.
And the fabulous Doris Birch is going to be joining us for some real girl talk, real woman talk about, menopause and all the things.
All the things they never told you. Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So we've got, who's coming?
So we got Cami Shaw. Yep. Cami is a nurse, a holistic nurse, and she's going to break down that madness of menopause and with real talk and help you navigate that.
Gosh, yes. And Dr. Erin Foley, she is the hormone detective. And that's important for you when you're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. She will help you discover why, so you can stop waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then we have, who do we have next?
Heather Almendinger, who is going to talk to us about how we embrace our cycle in a natural approach, how we should be acting, how we should be caring for our body, how we should be eating, all the things. So it'll be really interesting.
Yeah. And then finally, last but certainly not least, we have Tamira Hamilton, who is a genius in and of herself, but she's going to talk about the financial implications of menopause, right? And how to circumvent those. So
absolutely. Yeah, this is not your mama's menopause chat. It is honest, healing, and a little hilarious. So we would love if you reserve your spot now and get ready to feel seen, supported, and smiling through the change.
Yeah. June 12th, your investment is only $97, and the link will be in the comments. See you there.
See you there.
It is my pleasure to introduce our guest, Joanne Sorenson. Joanne has many years of experience as a Lutheran minister. She especially enjoyed taking groups of people on service and learning trips. And about 8 years ago, she created a nonprofit called In Our Hands. as a way to bring groups on learning adventures, and also work trips where they provide a service to a community and deepen their friendships. 2 years ago, she was asked to create a civil rights pilgrimage and has led 7 of those trips to Birmingham, Montgomery, and Selma, Alabama. So it is our pleasure to welcome Joanne Sorenson to Smiling Souls.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
Yes.
And it was inspiring to hear all of those words of wisdom, prophecy, whatever they are. They're amazing.
Yeah.
All of those. I can take them all.
Exactly. Yeah. They help kind of just start you on the right path, feeling like you're connected to what you're supposed to be connected to, right?
Yeah.
Now I've known you for a while, and I get so excited every time I hear about your trips, and I dream of taking my little guy on one of your trips at some point to teach him about all of the civil rights stuff, because he is very into everything. But tell us about just give us a little background, like, you know, being a Lutheran minister and then getting into these trips and whatnot. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so what's given me the most joy in those years was leading some trips. I was in 2 very different churches for about 10 years each. One was a big, large, kind of outer edge suburban sort of a church with a big staff. And while I was there, they wanted to start, I can't remember the term they called it, but anyway, a service kind of trip where we would go and do work projects and help people. And we ended up going to Jamaica and did all kinds of things, working with an orphanage and taking care of kids that were in trouble. We helped do building projects. We put on a tin roof and all kinds of different things, and then spent a lot of time just by the water and having a good time.
Yes.
And I would find out that with those trips and a couple of others after that I would come back with this group of people, and they were so enthused and excited and pumped about the experience that they had that they'd tell everybody else about it. And so the next time we would get a bunch of we didn't have to like sell the trip at all. It would just fill up because people heard about the incredible experience that the group had and the new friendships they made, and the connections that we had that we wanted to carry on and go back and see the people again. So that was such an eye-opening thing. I knew it would be a neat experience, but I didn't anticipate how much people would carry it back with them and talk to others about it. And so then we did something even bigger. We took a group of, I think, about 20 people to Tanzania and did a partnership with a church there, which was, vastly different than our church.
Right.
But this, Africans sing a lot and dance, and this church literally had 9 choirs.
Wow.
And when our little bus arrived in this village, there were this massive numbers of people with these branches, and they were doing this kind of thing on the edge of town. And we said, what's going on there? They must have a big event today. The big event was all of us arriving.
Yeah.
And we just kind of looked around like, what are we supposed to do here? And they surrounded our little bus, and we walked off the bus, and they just started singing and dancing.
It
was incredible. It was like entering heaven or something. It was just they're here. And it was just a phenomenal experience. And so that trip, and I did another one to Africa a few years later. And then I went to a different church and did a couple more service trips where we went to places in the South that had survived hurricanes. I think I did like 5 trips after Katrina to different locations where we stayed somewhere like in a church or community center and did building. And a lot of it's just, the painting at the end stage of fixing up a house or the trim or, little projects, sometimes bigger projects.
Yeah.
So, I got a little stronger, so I could haul a big piece of sheetrock and stuff, but Usually it's little smaller projects that I could do, but they're always, trained carpenter people around. But it wasn't so much the task that we did, but the experience of it and the connecting that people did with others in the group and in the nearby culture or place where we went.
Yeah.
So over the years, I would do these trips and think, this is just so incredible. I wish I could figure out how to just do these trips. And so towards the last couple of years of my time in this little town in Wisconsin, I met with this coach and we talked it over month after month. And she kind of helped me move from this big, hairy idea, like we're going to do trips and help people serve. And we'd narrow it down and scale it down until finally I kind of knew what I wanted to do and how to start. So then I took this way out of my comfort zone move and decided to quit working and start taking a little bit of my retirement, a very little bit.
Right.
And I moved back here to the Twin Cities. My kids are on their own then, and I was divorced many years ago. So it's just me and my checkbook. So I literally moved back here to the Twin Cities, small apartment, and I created a nonprofit called In Our Hands. And it was sort of a place for me to create those kinds of trips. So I started out with a few trips to places I'd already been and just sent out a little newsletter to people who knew about what I had done and people who'd been on my trips. I think the first trip I did was a trip to Pine Ridge, South Dakota, which is part of a large Pine Ridge reservation, Lakota reservation. And I think there were 7 people that went on that trip, and we stayed at this little retreat center and just met people in the community. Extremely poor people. We went to see the community, listened to their stories, and they came in and told us, like, there was a man that couldn't walk, but he did beautiful artwork, and he would come in and tell us about his artwork, and then we would help take care of some kids. That was kind of our service piece. And then every evening we had discussions about what we learned and what this experience was like and how it was kind of opening up our eyes to see things in a different way and how we were in this space where it's right in the heart of the US and nobody comes here. Anyway, it's just very eye-opening. And so I did that trip 2 different times, a very similar trip. I took groups back to the South to do some work trips. And then a couple of years ago, a church leader in my area of Wisconsin called and asked me to help to create what she wanted to call a pilgrimage, a civil rights pilgrimage. And I had never thought of doing anything like that. I knew a little about the civil rights history, but it's not something I'd studied in great detail. So I found these people in South Minneapolis that had done a trip like that. It was an older couple. They were retired teachers. And they just created a trip and took people, and then it would be word of mouth. And so over like 10 years, they had taken probably 1,000 people on this trip.
So cool.
And so we talked for hours, and I asked them question after question. I'm sure they were really tired of me by the end of our meeting. And I kind of put together a shorter version of their trip, and I had contacts that they had made. So, we go to Selma, Birmingham, and Montgomery, and then we meet with several people who they're called foot soldiers. They were part of the movement. They walked the bridge in Selma with Martin Luther King. And we hear firsthand what that experience is like. There was a man who spoke to us in Selma who was 14 when the march happened, but his parents let him march. But the police were rounding up people and putting them. I couldn't even believe this. It's a whole long story. I won't go into it. But essentially, as a youth, he was not allowed to participate in something like that, like a protest march. So the police would find the kids and literally put them in a holding center, a detention center, and not tell their parents where they were for like 3 or 4 days. parents didn't know where their kids were, but they wouldn't allow them to participate. And so eventually he would show up back at home. But it's terrifying to know that your kids have disappeared, or what's happened to them. They don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, somehow, long story short, he did get to go on the march. Wow. And it was just incredible. So hearing those stories firsthand gives you a whole different side of history.
Yeah.
And standing on the bridge, walking the bridge, and singing "We Shall Overcome." It's like, this really happened. It happened right here.
Yeah. Wow.
So I've kind of, since I keep getting asked to do that trip, I've sort of added more parts to it, and there's discussion every day, so we have time to process all the stuff that we're taking in and talk about what that means for us. And a lot of it's very contemporary. So
yeah.
So that's what I'm doing. I thought I was going to have a trip actually in May here this month, but everyone that I had as a possibility backed out. So I don't know if people are just not wanting to travel right now or what's going on, but looks like I have a trip this fall. So
okay, cool.
Not right now, but that's okay. I have plenty else to do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my main thing these days. And it's been like a dream come true, because I've enjoyed all these trips, and I've been able to kind of create my version of these trips that are so exciting and inspiring to people through the so.
Joanne, you mentioned serendipitous happenings on these trips. Can you share one of those stories with us?
I can. I could tell you many. Yeah, I feel like I'm just the observer. I don't create these things. They happen.
Right.
And it's just so interesting to watch this. But on the first trip, the group that I had went on a tour of the capital of Alabama, which is in Montgomery. And I decided after that trip that wasn't really civil rights history exactly. I mean, it's an interesting place to see, but I took it out of the trip later. But it's about like a 45-minute tour, and you walk around the state capitol and see the building. And the guy that was our tour guide is this elderly Black guy who was just a wonderful, funny guy. And he's you wouldn't think so, because he's just sort of like your down-home grandpa type guy that you just feel fun chatting with. And he's this historian known all over the country, and he travels the world and does speeches and stuff. So he gave us this tour of the state capitol, and then he said, "So where are y'all going after this?" And I said, "Well, we're going to go down to Selma. We're going to walk the bridge." He said, "Well, who's your guide?" And I said, "Well, we don't have a guide. We're just going down there."
Yeah.
I put a few more pieces together in the trips now, but that first one, we just were going to go to Selma and learn some history and look at stuff. We didn't have a guide. He said, "Well, do you mind if I join you?" And I said, "Well, sure, it'd be wonderful." But, he's kind of a free spirit. So he was done for the day at the Capitol. So he just took off for Selma. It's about not quite an hour drive from Montgomery, and met us at the bridge. And turns out that, everybody knows this guy. I just had met him, so I didn't know this. But everybody knows him. He's been in the area for essentially his whole life. So we're getting out of the car to go into this visitor center, and goes, "Hey, John, come over here and talk to these people about the thing on the other side of the bridge." So we essentially had the whole tour that we didn't even have planned. And he gave us his history. He had the guys that he knew come over and tell us about the Voting Rights Museum. Wow. He walked the bridge with us, and he told us about all the statues on the other side of the bridge and what they meant and who those people were. And then we ended up going to get some barbecue for dinner, and he came with us. And it was still restaurants are still closed. It was the beginning of 22, so a lot of places you couldn't go in and eat. So we ended up getting dinner and sitting in a park with him for like 2 hours while he told us his life story. And he'd been through horrible tragedies. He had the Klan burned down his uncle's house, and things that you've read in history, but this guy's lived through them. And he was in a little town, and white mobs came to ransack the town. And he's this joyful, happy person, and just shared his whole life with us.
That's
Told it, and then of all things, we found out that he himself had walked the bridge in Selma behind Martin Luther King and John Lewis. He was 19, and he was one of the people who was beaten, on Bloody Sunday. He was right there in the film. He was beaten, and of course, that back then, that if you were Black, you couldn't get treated in the hospital there. And he was completely unconscious, so they had to bring him to another town to be treated in a hospital. Somehow he survived. It was traumatic, of course, but he lived through it. And he told us a lot about, I won't even go into his whole long story, but essentially the state trooper, or whoever it was that was beating them, had a gun and actually took the gun out and pointed it at his head and said, "That's the end for you, mister," or some such thing like that. And it didn't fire. And so and I didn't remember that they used guns. I knew they beat people. So I assume that's what happened, but he said it didn't fire, and he got beaten instead and was just left on the road like other people. And, but he survived, and he went on to tell the story, and, talked about meeting John Lewis later in his life and things changing. But,
wow.
But he was there on Bloody Sunday and told us about that.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And, just was a most incredibly kind-hearted person, and spent all the time with us. And so the next 2 or 3 trips, I've called him and asked if he could come meet my groups, and he did.
That's so cool.
And now his wife is real sick, so he can't go out. But I was so fortunate to be able to meet him, and then have him come and to meet the groups, and kind of continue to tell his story after that. So.
That's really interesting.
So I never could have anticipated that something like that would happen in Selma, Alabama.
Sounds like he had his angels, and then they were guiding both of you together.
Exactly. Joanne, did you ever ask this gentleman, despite being beaten beyond, close to an inch of his life, you said he's a joyful man. Did you ask him how he got to, despite everything he's been through and suffered? I'm curious, like how did he do that?
That's a really good question. I don't think I heard that whole story. He talked a lot about his faith. He was very, what's the word? Not the kind of Christian that, like, here's the Bible, bang.
Right.
But he was like the vibrant kind that God loves you, and you got to accept that, and life is good in spite of everything. I mean, he really believed that. He wasn't just like quoting a line. He really believed that and lived it. He talked also about, I don't know if you remember Governor George Wallace. He was the evil governor that said segregation forever in Alabama in the 60s, and he had to be told by the federal government to stand down. And somehow this guy got to know him, maybe he went back to school and got his PhD in history later in his life. And he was also a farmer, but he got to know Governor Wallace. And at the end of his life, after he'd had a tragedy, he was shot and was in a wheelchair towards the end of his life, and had quite a change of heart and apologized to the whole Black community for his violent racism. I mean, it's an incredible story.
Wow.
And this guy said, that's been in the news and everybody knows that. But what people don't know is that when he died, a lot of his old white cronies wouldn't have anything to do with him. And so at his funeral, a lot of the Black community was there, and they are the ones that carried his coffin out of the funeral.
Wow.
And so he felt like he and the former governor had become friends at the end of his life. So What a
It's that
story.
true
I knew a little
heart-centered.
bit about that story because, he was the governor when I was really young, but I didn't know that.
I didn't know that whole end part. No.
And he talked about how he was very verbal and very open about forgiveness and how that turned a lot of people against him. So what a story.
Oh my gosh.
So when you live through things like that, you either end it or you become incredibly joyful because life is precious and it's fleeting.
Yep. Well, and it sounds like he truly lived like Martin Luther King Jr.'s beliefs,
Right.
Loving everyone and
you choose love or you choose not to. And that's
exactly. And that the only way to defeat hate and darkness is with love. So
right. Yep. And it was obvious to me that he really does believe that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's living it.
Yeah.
That story about Governor
Wallace.
Does that give you hope? Because it gives me hope that even the most evil person in the world can have a change of heart and say that verbally and say, I was wrong and I apologize. That gives me, in the midst of all this stuff that's happening, it gives me a little glimmer of hope. So thank you for that, Joanne.
Yeah, I mean, the hate, it's hard to keep the hate going. Love is, I realize it's a huge contest and I don't want to make it sound simple, but it's really hard to keep that kind of hardness going. And that's not the way people operate. We function with love and kindness to one another. That's how the vast majority of us operate.
Yep.
Or else we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, really.
So
it's much easier. It's so much easier to be in a place of love and yeah, you're right. It's hard. It's hard
to keep it going. Obviously, we all go through trials and tribulations and horrible things happen, but to stay in that place, it's really hard. You have to work really hard to have a politics of revenge, as I've heard people say.
You can't maintain it.
No, exactly.
That's good to know.
No, that's true. I really believe that. And so I don't think that that's the longer story.
You're absolutely right. I needed to hear that today. I don't know about anybody else. I needed to hear that today.
I know. I need to hear it every day because I'm like, oh boy, this isn't looking good.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like Joanne, do you remember back in the day, you had to call a number for time and temperature?
Yes.
I feel like you would be like one of those people that I would just call every day and I would hear a pre-recorded message of hope.
Let me work on that. I don't know if I can come up with a line for every day, but it's so much better to be surrounded by stories like that. That's why I love going on these trips because, we're studying a really horrible time in history, and looking at the history of slavery is horrendous. But then sitting down with people and processing that, and looking at what they're learning and coming out with, and the stories of hope and resilience and resistance are so heartwarming. So it's after the second trip, I thought, am I going to do this trip again? And I'm like, yeah, I'll do it again. Because they're so life-giving for me. So
absolutely. Well, and it's important to keep remembering them, unfortunately, many of those marchers and those people who were fighting, they're getting up there now, and not as many of them are with us. So, continuing to remember them long after they're gone is super important.
Right. Exactly.
Why
it's so important to continue to learn from our history and not forget about it or try to erase it, which is happening.
Yeah, exactly.
So, even the unpleasant parts, we have to look at it and take from it and not pretend it didn't happen. So,
yeah, absolutely.
We start out the trip at the Legacy Museum.
Okay.
Which is in Montgomery, and it's a fairly new museum, but it's It's actually built in a warehouse that used to house slaves. They would take the slaves from off the ships and at the Alabama River in Montgomery, and then literally put them in a warehouse and then sell them in the center of town. You can still see, right down where they marched to the center courtyard. And you walk through there, and it gives you just a bigger picture than I've ever had of what life was like. And then you get on a little bus, and it takes you to the memorial. It's like a big cemetery, but it's outdoor, and it's very quiet, kind of sacred space. And it's called the Lynching Memorial. And they literally found dirt at the base of every tree where they know historically that someone was lynched. And they made a memorial with these big steel boxes that are hanging all throughout this center, and it's got the names of every person who the ones that they could find from history, who killed, and they're all there. And it's the only place anywhere where there's actually a spot to remember them.
Wow.
And that's pretty overwhelming to go through.
I've never heard of that place. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, there's the museum and then this memorial that are nearby, and then you can go back and forth between them. And now they just opened an art park that's really incredible. Got every kind of art you can imagine, these stone sculptures and a wall with all the names of people who were enslaved, literally like every name that they could find. Wow. It's huge.
That's interesting.
I want to go back, and I just was there 2 times briefly, and there's so much I just want to go in there and like meditate and just be in the quiet and experience it more. So
yeah, that's what I was going to ask is, you go to certain places and you can feel the energy of the history, and yeah, must be.
And they're hard. It's not like it's an easy place because you're learning this painful history. But this art park it's a different energy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't explain it, but it's because art is healing. And I'm not an artist exactly, but to read a little bit about the artist whose work is there is really amazing.
And the whole point of it
got
would be
some stories
heal.
of people. Yeah. So I'd like to just go in there and soak it up.
Nice. That sounds really cool.
So,
so Joanne, as you're talking, I'm curious, do you have any plans to write a book?
Oh my gosh. I have thought of that many, many times, but actually sitting down and doing it is another thing.
It's another thing.
I've written sermons over many, many years. I could just take those and make a couple of books.
Right. There you go.
But I'm not sure. I mean, there's a couple of different directions I'd like to go with that if I did it, but I don't. The final idea hasn't come to my mind that this is it, do this one.
Yeah.
Right.
I've given it a lot of thought.
Okay, good. Just hearing you talk, and it's life affirming. It gives me hope. And I just thought, how beautiful would it be for you to put all that into a book so that more people can be uplifted and learning from your experiences. Just saying.
Yeah, it's certainly a thought. I'll keep thinking about it. I haven't written it out of the plans or anything like that. So.
And then you can come back here and promote it.
Oh, you're funny. Yeah.
Wendy's
just going to keep poking.
Hey, Joanne, how's that book coming? She's like, no, don't do that.
No, I'm not quite sure what the next.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in there kind of like this thing, like going like that, but I don't know quite what to do next. So I'll still, it's on the back burner. I'll put it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see probably multiple different.
I can too.
Things,
it's not going to be just one book.
No.
It's going to be a series. It could be sky's the limit.
Yeah.
The card, who had the card that said that sky's the limit?
Yeah, look at these cards you people pulled today. It's like
right.
calling. I mean, I could write a whole book just about that.
Yep.
And then taking risks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not me.
No.
So, but taking this big step and deciding not to work at my typical job where I had been for a long time.
Huge.
And to try to do a new, I knew there was some step of some creative thing that I needed to do, but I didn't know what it was. And so, thankfully I had this wonderful coach that I still have that just kind of helped me keep coming up with the plan and working on the plan. And otherwise it would have still been this big hairy idea in my head instead of actually coming to fruition. And it's still, it isn't now what I would have thought it would be even 5 years ago. And I think part of that's because of COVID. I mean, I had a year where nobody could travel and I couldn't do the things that I wanted. And I did have a job for 1 year, which was great. But ideally, in the best of all possible worlds, I would have had more people working on this with me by now, and I would be doing a number of different trips at one time.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be like that. It's not like I'm unhappy just doing this particular trip right now. It's just that I kind of envision doing several different things.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Can you say a little bit about the trip that's planned for the fall?
Yeah. So right now I've got a small group of women who want to do the trip that I've typically done to Alabama, which I've done it as a 5 or 6 day trip. So we leave. The problem is so many of these places are closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. So I start on Wednesday. We start with the Legacy Museum, and that takes a long time. So that's most of the first day. And then we have a tour of Montgomery and hear the civil rights history there. Then we go to Selma and then on to Birmingham for a couple of days. And we meet with someone else there who survived the bombing of the church in the 60s. And this last trip I did last year, we had one additional day at the Martin Luther King Center in Atlanta. So we fly to Atlanta, do all of those things. We drive in a van and then go back to Atlanta and finish. So I'm planning on doing that in the trip for the fall. I just don't have the dates yet. And then I'm kind of working on a second trip. Last year, I went with a friend to Savannah and Charleston, which are two fascinating cities. If you've never been there, you got to go there. And there's enough history there to do I'm calling it Civil Rights 2.0. But it's a different version of the things that happened in those cities were very different than Alabama. Because it's the coast, and it's actually where some of the slave ships entered. Charleston was one of the big ports. And there's a huge it's called the International African American Center or something like that. And it's got art and history and civil rights stuff. And it's built right on the port where the ships all came in. And that's a fascinating place. And then just down the street from that center is Mother Emanuel Church, where that shooting happened in 2015. And that's an interesting place to visit. It's a Black AME church, so it's very hopping. I mean, the music is pumping. And there's people there that are willing to meet with groups that come in and want to hear their story. So, it's just there's so much to do in those two cities. So I haven't sat down and planned the trip, but I'm thinking of a 2.0 trip, and I think there's some people that are interested in that. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing. And this will be in the show notes, but you can find more information. Get in touch with Joanne at inourhandsadventures.com. Have her Facebook, Instagram, all the ways that you can connect with Joanne in the show notes. Courtesy of Steph, who is in charge of that.
Well, and the website I just have a brand new website that just went up a couple weeks ago, and it's got a lot more of the details about the trip.
Oh, wow.
And you can actually sign up on the website.
Nice.
And get the forms and everything right there. So you just look around in it a bit and you can find all the details about the trip.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being our guest today. I'm so glad that you joined us.
Oh, it's been fun.
Yeah.
It has been an honor. Thank you, Joanne.
Yeah, thanks for letting me talk. I loved it.
Excellent. We could listen to your stories all day. All right. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.